You wake up 30,000 years ago. There's no alarm, no boss, no email screaming at you before your eyes are even open. Nobody asks what you do. There is no Monday. There is no career. There is no LinkedIn. And yet, somehow, you are busier than you have ever been in your life. Because here's the thing we get completely wrong about ancient humans. We look at a world without jobs and assume it was a world without work. Empty days, sitting around a fire, waiting for something to happen. Cavemen with nothing to do. Wrong. Deeply, spectacularly wrong. The truth is that before jobs existed, ancient humans didn't have less to do. They had everything to do. All of it, every single day. And figuring out how they filled those days tells you something strange about what a job actually is. Let's start with the obvious assumption. Most people imagine that without agriculture, offices, or money, prehistoric life was basically survival on hard mode, all day, every day. Constant hunger, constant hunting, a grim, exhausting scramble just to stay alive until sunset. But the evidence points somewhere weirder. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups, the closest living echo of that ancient rhythm, suggest that working for food often took only a few hours a day. A few hours, that's it. The rest of the time was not spent grinding. It was spent doing something we've almost forgotten how to do. So what did they actually do? First, there was the food, and this wasn't a job in the way we think of jobs, because it wasn't one task repeated forever. A hunter-gatherer had to be a walking encyclopedia. Which plants are food? Which plants are medicine? Which plants will quietly kill you? Where the animals move by season? How to read a footprint, a broken branch, the smell of rain coming? Where water hides during a drought? That's not one skill, that's dozens of expert skills stacked inside one exhausted brain. A modern person might spend years training to be a doctor or a chef or a tracker or a botanist. An ancient human had to be a little bit of all of them, or the whole group suffered. That is not a simpler life. That is a life with no specialists to hide behind. Then there was the making, and this is where it gets fascinating. Ancient humans were constantly building the tools that kept them alive. Stone blades chipped with terrifying precision. Bone needles, some of them tens of thousands of years old, thin and delicate, used to sew fitted clothing that made surviving the Ice Age possible. Rope, baskets, traps, shelters, containers. Think about a single bone needle for a second. Someone had to find the right bone, shape it, bore a hole through it without snapping it, then use it over and over, stitching hides into something that would keep a child warm through a freezing night. That is not just a tool. That is engineering, patience, and love, all packed into an object smaller than your finger. Okay, stop, because here's where the story really changes. Ancient humans didn't just work to survive. They worked on things that had nothing to do with survival at all. Deep inside caves, sometimes hundreds of meters from the entrance, in total darkness, humans painted. Animals, handprints, strange symbols. They dragged pigment and fire into places where nobody lived, where no meal was cooked, where survival was actively harder. And they made art, on purpose, for hours. Nobody paid them. No client requested it. There was no deadline. And they did it anyway. That is not decoration. That is a mind reaching for meaning. That is a human being saying, without words, I was here and this mattered. And it didn't stop at painting. They carved figurines. They strung beads made from shells and animal teeth. Ornaments that carried no calories and killed no predators, but told everyone who saw them exactly who you were. Status, belonging, identity. The oldest known personal jewelry is tens of thousands of years old. That bead necklace, that's not a trinket. That's the ancient version of every outfit, every logo, every carefully chosen profile picture. It's a human broadcasting their place in the group. Which brings us to the biggest job of all, the one nobody lists on a resume: being part of the group. An enormous amount of ancient human time went into each other. Grooming, talking, sharing food, settling arguments, teaching children how the world worked, not through school, but through stories, imitation, and constant presence. Caring for the sick and the injured. We know this because we found skeletons of people who survived serious injuries or lived into old age with conditions that would have made them helpless. Someone fed them, someone carried them, someone chose to. That care took time. That care was work. It just wasn't the kind of work you get paid for. And underneath all of it was something that sounds almost impossible to a modern brain drowning in notifications. There was boredom. Long, quiet, empty stretches of time around the fire at night, when the hunting was done and the light was gone and there was nothing urgent left to do. But that emptiness wasn't wasted. That's exactly where the good stuff came from. In that quiet, humans told stories, invented gods, made up music, played games, argued about the stars, passed down memory. The empty space wasn't nothing. It was the workshop where imagination came alive. That is not laziness. That is the birthplace of everything we now call culture. So let's go back to the assumption we started with, that a world without jobs was a world without purpose, a blank, grim struggle. It wasn't. It was the opposite. Ancient humans had no jobs, but they had roles. Fluid, overlapping, deeply human roles. Provider, maker, teacher, healer, storyteller, artist, protector. You weren't one thing. You were whatever the day and the group needed you to be. And here's the part that should quietly bother you. The invention of the job, a single specialized task you repeat for someone else in exchange for survival, is incredibly recent. For the vast majority of human existence, hundreds of thousands of years, that concept simply didn't exist. Work wasn't separate from life. It was life, woven into food, family, meaning, and each other all at once. We didn't invent work. Work was always there. What we invented was the wall between work and living. The clock, the boss, the idea that your time belongs to someone else for 8 hours, and then briefly, it belongs to you again. Ancient humans would find that genuinely strange. The notion that you'd separate the making of a thing from the meaning of a thing. That you do something for 40 years and never touch why it mattered. So the next time you catch yourself asking someone, "What do you do?" notice how modern that question really is. Because for almost all of human history, the honest answer would have been overwhelming. Everything. I do everything. I hunt and gather and build and heal and teach and paint and remember and protect and survive. Not because it's my job, because it's my life. So here's the real question. If your job disappeared tomorrow, if the whole idea of a job just vanished, like it never existed for most of our story, what would you actually spend your days doing? And would any of it feel more human than what you're doing right now? That's the end, but also kind of the beginning. The next video picks up exactly where your curiosity is right now. It's one click away. You already know what to do.